When I bought the Snapmaker U1, I said to myself, I wasn't going to modify it. That lasted 3 days. Before I knew it, I was designing parts, remixing other people's designs, and slowly turning this printer into something that felt completely my own. Some upgrades fixed problems. Some made life a bit easier. Others made the printer look awesome. And one of them happened because I managed to get my fingers stuck in the circulation fan. Don't ask. Today I'm going to show you every upgrade I've added to my Snapmaker U1, why I printed it, whether it was actually worth printing, which ones I'd install again, without hesitation. Believe it or not, this was actually the first thing I printed. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I bought this orange PETG specifically for all the accent pieces you'll be seeing throughout the video. There was just one problem, the spool didn't fit. The center hole was larger than the stock Snapmaker spool holder. Now, I could have gone out and bought another roll of filament, but where's the fun in that? I found this simple universal spool adapter. It slides straight onto the original holder, supports larger spool hubs, and solves the problem in about 10 seconds. It's just one of those prints that nobody gets excited about until they actually need it. And without it, none of the orange parts you've seen throughout this video would even exist. Now, this is probably my favorite upgrade. Originally, I printed this kit to trigger my phone using a Bluetooth camera remote. And honestly, it worked really well. But after watching the first time-lapse, I couldn't help thinking, if it looks this good on a phone, what would it look like on my Sony a6400? So, I remixed the designer's original remote holder to fit my wired camera shutter release instead, and I'm so glad I did it. The printer pauses at every layer, the camera captures a perfectly sharp photo, the printer carries on, and when you stitch everything together, you end up with footage like this. I love it. And honestly, I can sit and watch these for hours. I'm not going to explain exactly how the system works today because there's quite a bit involved. Instead, I'll be making a dedicated video showing the entire setup process from start to finish. Trust me, if you enjoy making 3D printing videos, you're going to love this. After that, I wanted somewhere to keep all the tools that originally came with the Snapmaker U1. So I found this tray that fits neatly into the bottom of the printer. It worked exactly how I hoped. Every tool had its own place. Nothing rolled around, everything stayed organized, and honestly, I was pretty happy with it. But then, while printing the enclosure, I discovered that the designer had also created a matching tool tray. Now, this one just looked better. It matched the enclosure perfectly, fit the overall theme, and made the inside of the printer feel much more cohesive. So, my original tray was officially retired after a mere 2 days. Now, at this point, I thought I was done printing small accessories. But then, I decided to do something very clever. I stuck my finger into the circulation fan. Yeah, that happened. Thankfully, only my pride was damaged. That was the moment I realized this fan probably needed a little protection. So I printed this honeycomb fan guard. It simply presses into place, looks like it came from the factory, and now protects curious fingers from making the same mistake, or more specifically, protects me from myself. Once I'd solved the fan problem, I started noticing something else. Tiny bits of filament everywhere. Strings, little blobs, printer poop, you know, the usual. But then I noticed the ventilation holes in the bottom of the printer. Some of these tiny pieces looked just small enough to disappear straight through. Maybe they would, but I wasn't really interested in finding out. So, naturally, I printed another cover. Now, before somebody points out in the comments, yes, these aren't perfectly flat, and that's completely my fault. I got impatient, removed the PETG while it was still hot, and warped them. PETG doesn't appreciate that. Thankfully, a little heat from the heat gun pulled everything back into shape. Lesson learned. Sometimes the printer isn't the problem. Sometimes the impatient person operating it is. Speaking of printer poop, I noticed something else. Every now and then, the printer would completely miss the poop bin. I'd walk back into the room, and there it'd be, one lonely little purge blob, sitting somewhere inside the enclosure. Not exactly a disaster, just annoying. So I started searching and found this brilliant little design. It's simply a guard that helps direct the purge straight into a waste container. What I really like is that it stays completely out of the way. It doesn't interfere with the print bed. It doesn't interfere with tool changing, and it doesn't interfere with nozzle cleaning. It just quietly does its job. And honestly, that's exactly what a good design should do. Apparently, this printer had surprisingly bad aim. Next, I remember watching somebody online complain about manually leveling the U1. They said the little adjustment knobs hurt their fingertips. And I remember thinking, oh, come on man, it can't be that bad. I was wrong. I owe that person an apology. Those tiny knobs are horrible, especially at the awkward angle you have to reach from. Thankfully, this designer offers a whole range of adjustment knob handles. I picked this design because I already used something similar on one of my previous prints, and it worked brilliantly. The difference is honestly night and day. By this point, the printer was becoming far more enjoyable to use, but there was just one thing that still bothered me. Originally, the printer was sitting just on this table. However, I then decided to put it on a 500 by 500 by 40mm concrete paver, utilizing the original packing foam from the Snapmaker U1's unboxing underneath it. The idea actually worked surprisingly well until I realized the paver wasn't perfectly flat. One corner of the printer was floating, so I cheated just a little and I shimmed it and continued printing. Sometimes good enough rarely is good enough, at least temporarily. Eventually, I found this, a 600 by 600 by 30mm quartz slab, and honestly, I think it looks fantastic. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Who puts what looks like a luxury kitchen counter under a 3D printer? Apparently, I do. At first, I kept the original packing foam underneath it. It isolated vibration brilliantly, but there was just one problem. The foam. It was simply too soft. The printer could rock far more than I liked. So I kept experimenting. Eventually, I landed on this setup. 4 pieces of industrial conveyor belt rubber supporting the quartz slab, which itself sits on another full sheet of conveyor belt rubber. Now, the printer feels rock solid. Almost no wobble, very little vibration reaches the desk, and I couldn't be happier. Once the enclosure was almost finished, I noticed one last problem, and that's on the left side of the door. There's a gap. It's a surprisingly large gap. That meant warm air could escape, and so could some of the noise. So I printed this TPU Door Seal. It simply sticks on using double-sided tape, compresses gently against the glass, and creates a much better seal. It's one of those upgrades that almost disappears once it's installed. But if you took it away, you'd definitely notice the printer runs quieter, the chamber temperature stays more consistent, and it makes the enclosure feel complete. And finally, we've reached my favorite upgrade. The enclosure. This completely transformed the printer. Originally, this design was intended to use acrylic, but I decided to do something slightly different. I used 3mm glass, not because acrylic is bad, because I simply prefer glass. It's clearer, more scratch resistant, easier to clean, and in my opinion, gives the entire printer a much more premium appearance. The designer did an incredible job. Assembly instructions were clear, glass dimensions were provided. Even the badge is completely editable, so of course I had to make it layer forge. One thing I really appreciate is the modularity. There are already loads of optional upgrades, sound dampening panels, extra accessories, different configurations. It feels less like a printable enclosure and more like an ecosystem. I did make one small modification. Because I use a wide camera shutter for my time lapses, I added a small notch in the lower corner, a quick Boolean mesh, and everything fit perfectly. The only compromise came from my decision to use glass. Since the glass is firmer than the original acrylic, I had to remove the PTFE tube guards. That wasn't the designer's fault. That was entirely my choice. And honestly, I'd make that decision again. The finished result looks incredible. It's quieter, it holds heat far better. It feels like a completely different printer. And every time I walk into the room, I can't help but to just stare at it. For me, this enclosure is an easy 10 out of 10. If you've been looking closely, you've probably noticed something else. Almost every single printed part looks a little different. That's because almost everything you've seen today was printed using Perlin's fuzzy skin. That completely changed how I look at my 3D printed parts. And honestly, I don't think I'm ever going back. When I first discovered fuzzy skin, I thought it was just another gimmick, something to make prints feel different. But after experimenting with different settings, I completely changed my mind. Not only does it hide layer lines incredibly well, it completely changes the way finished parts look. And because almost every modification inside this printer uses the same texture, everything feels like it belongs together. And that's exactly what I wanted. Looking back, none of these upgrades are revolutionary on their own. Most of them are actually pretty small. One stores tools, one keeps the printer quieter, one catches printer poop, nothing life-changing, but together they've completely transformed this machine. It's cleaner, it's quieter, more organized, more stable, more enjoyable to use, and it feels like my printer, not just a printer. So, those are all the upgrades I've added to the Snapmaker U1. At least for now. Because, let's be honest, I'm probably not finished yet. If you've got a favorite U1 modification that I haven't tried, let me know down in the comments. I'd genuinely love to check it out. And if you'd like to see how I built a time-lapse system or want a full walkthrough of the enclosure, make sure you're subscribed. I've got plenty more Snapmaker content coming soon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been LayerForge, and I'll see you next time.